This statement now, you've said it a few times. The ATS as we know it won't exist in 3 years. That's bold, but you confidently stand by it. So why do you believe that, and what's that mean to you?
It is bold. 1998, first .com. The reason why ATS came about was because job board distribution, job boards, post and praise. What's going to happen though is nothing's changed. It's just a database. You store anything up for recruitment. So jobs, of course, resumes, contacts.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a great mic drop episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we've got shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space. Other days we cover trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be very soon and what those mean for them. Stop by every Tuesday. We've got a Tactical Tuesday episode where we'll go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Every once in a while, we open up for Q&A. Listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on, so send those to us at podcast@loxo.co. And occasionally, you'll hear a mic drop episode like today where Matt stops by to share something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. All right, so as I said, today, we've got Matt joining us for a mic drop today because a few episodes, Matt casually dropped in the middle of our conversation, the traditional ATS and the traditional way of recruiting will not exist in 3 years. It honestly took me about every ounce of willpower on my side not to just completely derail that conversation and ask him to unpack that mic drop of a statement. So I was like, hey, Matt, come back. Let's really get into what you meant when you said the traditional ATS, the traditional way of recruiting will not exist in 3 years. So enough of my preamble. Matt, let's get into it. So this statement now, you've said it a few times. The ATS as we know it won't exist in 3 years. That's bold, but you confidently stand by it. So why do you believe that, and what's that mean to you?
It is bold. I actually got called out the other day by a recruiter on LinkedIn, which I loved, and I'm grateful for. People should. Opposing opinions are really helpful and healthy. The fascinating thing was that individual is probably very close to retirement, right? And it's just indicative of what's going to happen. I think 80% of Fortune 500 companies are now out of business, right? Since 1955. So any white collar business professionals use basically business process software, and recruiters, of course, their business process system of record software is an ATS. It's just a database, right? And so 1998, first .com, the reason why ATS came about was because, job board distribution, job boards, post and pray. So what's going to happen though is nothing's changed. It's just a database. You store anything up for recruitment. So jobs, of course, resumes, contacts, but that's it. It's very intensive, data intensive, very manual. And the bigger problem is, more importantly, is with where we're going is it's impossible for a regular database to learn. So it's like a black box. You put all of your data in there and it's not accessible, or you can't utilize it. And of course, you're never going to be able to utilize the knowledge that your recruiters are harnessing. So you can, especially with AI.
Yeah, so it's this repository of single-use only job pipelines that provides no value to a recruiter whatsoever after that job is filled or after it's abandoned. And when you think about all of the candidates, all of the conversations, all of the data, all the insights that you've gleaned from these, especially if you've been in the job for not only just years, but decades at this point, that seems like a massive underutilization of information for any future searches. I don't know. It's crazy to think that no one's really tapped into this yet.
It's wild. And especially for all the executive search and recruitment agencies, professional recruiting organizations, they tend to have specialisms, and they focus on certain industry niches and certain sectors. And they have to spend, like you said, 15 years to figure out and build up that knowledge. But what happens, even exec search do this, of course, theirs are lower volume, but higher volume, they always start every search from scratch. The only companies that do this, generally in-house, if you're recruiting call center or in the insurance space, they do this a lot. They have the same persona types and they have assessments, right? So you're not necessarily starting from scratch in those, but the vast majority of searches, people are starting from scratch. And the problem is what are you doing? Let's say your recruiters come and go and you have to keep hiring new people. It's the knowledge from that single recruiter, it just walks out the door with them. And so that's the big problem with ATS.
Yeah, that's interesting. And as you say, it's like that's why there was so much value in either having those couple big billers on your team or the little black books that they had, because they had that knowledge, they had the contacts that is now we're realizing this can easily be translated over to your technology. So a lot of the way that's always been done seems like it stems from the traditional post and pray recruiting methodology. But this is where you're starting to see things shift a little bit, right?
Yeah, you're starting to a lot. I think, and I kind of shared that story to start with. The other day, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're talking about how, should recruiters be fearful of AI replacing them? And the individual is like, of course not. This is exactly right. We've been leveraging and utilizing these more progressive tools and using machine learning for a while, right? And so the ones that are ahead of the curve are fine. But the vast majority, and we shared this in our company the other day, is even within agencies, professional recruiting companies still largely post and pray. There's like 3 types, right? You post and pray, post to job boards, or you do the referrals like, hey, we got a new open search. Like, who do you know who's a rock star A player for whatever job title, right? And that's really how they do it. And that last one would be poking, page by page and pagination through LinkedIn or, Monster, Career Builder, ZipRecruiter, you name it. It's just not scalable. It's not efficient, and it's just way too manual.
I was talking to Will Grassoff the other day, who recent podcast episode, and he was talking about just the concept of taking a brief when you get started with a job. So do you think some of this also stems from the fundamentals where people are just like, I've been hired to fill this position, here's a job description, and then they don't really push further to understand, well, what do I need to know about that company? What do I need to know about that role? What am I really looking for that best match candidate? Like, is it just they're so ingrained in this is the way I've always done recruiting and this is the way I'm going to continue to do it?
That's a really good question. That's why we could talk about this all day long. It just depends on, that's why, you could have a 10X or 100X recruiter, and technology and tools don't matter. It's that human has so much recruitment acumen that you can't even teach it. And those are the superstars. Those will be the superstars of the future. What we're trying to do is help the average recruiter and the run-of-the-mill recruiter who that's their job and their company needs them or relying on them, their family is. How can we help them be a lot better? And they don't know. And they don't know how to filter properly in tools necessarily. They don't know the right Boolean search terms. It's hard to get up to speed on how quickly roles are changing and adopting. It's too complex, right? And then let alone you have to go get a rock star candidate that is going to get hired when the market's pretty scarce in general. And most passive talent aren't moving. So that's why everyone does post and pray. It's easy, right? It's like, come on, please, this person's applying, pitch it over the fence. But then ultimately it's what you and I've talked a lot about. It's the best mutual fit. Every organization, you could have a horrible company, a horrible role. You don't pay anything, right? You have to work from 8 till 10 p.m. at night every day. You're not going to attract a world-class talent, right? And a lot of hiring managers also will just unfortunately hire who they're more comfortable with. Like you've heard that A players hire B players, B hire C's, you hire D, and that's what happens all the time. People lower the bar, and so the who do you know works really well in those organizations. It's just like just have somebody that's a good cultural fit. It's my cousin, it's my neighbor. They need a job. That's not world-class recruitment. You can do it in a much more intelligent way.
Yeah, it's good enough. And so a different segment I think about with like the current limitations of some of the ATS stuff is some of the topics we've talked about in recent episodes: succession planning, internal mobility. You cannot do this with the traditional ATS. You might not know what internal employees are a great fit for your job openings. You might not know how to create some of that planning. So where do you see some of that coming into play with, like, should that be handled by an ATS, or is that where we do get into this, like, this is why the current way of recruiting is not going to exist in 3 years, because with the rise in this type of promotion and recruiting, like you just simply can't do it with your current tech stack.
You can't, and you nailed it. And this is why it's the talent intelligence platform era. I mean, you have, again, it goes back to like, what's the job to be done? It's business process software. You need a system of record, a platform. And the reason why you have a system of record is because it has to handle the end-to-end workflow of, talent acquisition is a larger umbrella, but just recruitment. The ATS was a great start, right? It helped facilitate jobs and storing data, but with where we're going and talking about, building talent pools and pipelines and outbound recruitment, and now you have automation, and the only way you can use AI in general is you have to be able to harness and utilize the data that's already in there. So again, the ATS won't work, but succession planning and talent pipeline building, internal mobility, those are kind of almost like a feature. A lot of companies are trying to roll out solutions for that in the marketplace and go all in on it. But when you really unpack and dig into it, it's really just a feature. It's like a new filter, right? Recruitment's it's not rocket science. Like you have you have jobs, a job to fill, you have a data of candidates, right? And you're trying to help match those. And the reason why they're putting all of these fancy terms and names around them is because they need to justify the value, the valuation of these software companies, and to sell these platforms that cost, $700,000 a year, which no one renews, or you have to justify that, long-term planning of the big giant recruitment orgs to, roll out these really complex talent acquisition initiatives. But it's all just a variation of recruitment.
Yeah. All right. So fast forward, we're now 3 years ahead. The traditional ATS as we know has disappeared forever. Like something still needs to cover those jobs to be done, like you said, especially what the ATS served. So what is that now? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So fast forward 3 years from now. So that's a talent intelligence platform. So it's just a long-term strategic approach to hiring using data-driven, AI-powered products to improve talent acquisition activities within an enterprise, exec search firm, or professional recruiting organization.
Okay. So obviously subtle plug for Loxo, but like talent intelligence platform, that's a category. It's not like we're the first to do it. So that's why we're obviously going to praise it. But so we're moving in this direction. And so there's tons of other existing recruiting tech out there, from recruitment CRMs, ATS tools, sourcing tools. I mean, we know the gamut, the 10 plus different bolt-ons that people get. So what are individuals going to try to do to get ahead of things like that? So 3 years from now, like what are some of the big players doing in the space to keep up?
Yeah. And even though as a plug, we believe it with everything we have, and we built it, and it took a decade to do. But now everyone's seeing it. And so I talked about this a while ago. Most companies didn't see it. We talked about with my co-founder and I, they don't see it. They saw certain pieces, and usually, and Tim Sackett knows this from the HR tech space, there's a lot of copycat, right? Oh, they got this new feature, let's go copy that. Oh, that works really well, let's copy it. And some people just build things, they don't know if it adds a lot of value. But even there's some of big companies like Smart Recruiters years ago, it might have been 10 years ago, rolled out a really good model where they're trying to solve this problem, and they put a lot of build a marketplace of recruiters. There was no business model behind that where they could monetize it. So eventually it became ATS, but now they also have some AI. The long story short though is the market doesn't care, and it all sounds the same. Every vendor sounds the same. They're not, they're so different. So the existing rec tech, what's happened is, and it's gonna get way worse. It exploded just like MarTech. So MarTech, those graphs you've seen before, you had like 10 vendors out there, then it blows up to 5,000 vendors. Mm-hmm. Rec tech is the same thing. Rec tech's even worse now. And you probably have, it's just like Starbucks on every corner of the street, right? What's going to happen though is that there's going to be mass consolidation, and you're going to have a few really large incumbents, but the big ones are now all starting to not just consolidate, but they're converging on the same type of notion. So like iCIMS had a phenomenal CEO that left recently, and they really transitioned from a legacy ATS. They try to go to the talent cloud platform, right? Anybody can call it what they want, but they started to acquire point solution vendors, right? Just to fill these pillars. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is now everyone's trying to copy this, and you have other ones, right? JobVite's ecosystem has acquired, there's an RPO, then JobVite, Lever. They're just trying to wrap them all up, but then they're all trying to coin themselves as this, platform. But that's, if you note, the big difference is everyone's trying to acquire these really critical. Everyone knows now it's a very defined category. You need outbound recruiting. You need an ATS. You need a recruiting CRM. Obviously, you have to have reporting to facilitate that, right? But where does AI and data come into play? And that's the problem. When you have all these point solution tools, they were never built. There's a lot of issues. They were never built to be in one unified workflow. So it's really clunky. Your users you're spending a lot of money to try to roll them out. You have to hire 10 consultants for 5 years to duct tape them together. In the meantime, your leadership come and go because it's been 2 years before you rolled out. So you're never getting adoption. And this is just what's happening, right? The point solution approach won't work. They can call it whatever they want, and they can say they have these features and functions, and they do. And their poor customers, then they're like, hey, we have this brand new AI solution and sourcing tool. Why don't you guys use it and adopt it? We'll train you on it. And then they get on meetings. It's like, well, you guys told us that 18 months ago. We still haven't seen it. It doesn't work. And I hear this all the time. So that, the existing rec tech, I mean, they're doing everything they can to keep up, and they're doing the best to keep their customers. And hopefully they're trying to IPO, or they are publicly traded, and they want to keep their customers and retain them, but their poor customers don't know. If their customers knew what else was out there and alternatives, they would change immediately, right? But that change management for their leaders is hard because they're fearful that it's going to be more painful than it really is.
Yeah. So they're recognizing that the workflow is changing, and they're adapting to that. We've got a cloud now. We can serve all these, because they also recognize that the data that supplies is so important. But where it breaks is they're made through acquisitions. They're made through integrations. And so as you're trying to go through that workflow, it's still clunky. The data is not always fully syncing and everything else. So they're trying to do it, but it's the Frankenstein's monster, essentially, where it's like you're trying to build this perfect thing, but it's not quite going to work, because there's always going to be that you can't stitch something on. It has to be natively just part of one seamless workflow, one platform that houses all of the data, so you can do that job that you're trying to do. Yep,
exactly. It has to be one native, and that's why we call it. I mean, it's a mouthful, right? Data-driven AI. Horizontal platform. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, that's really intentional, right? You have, of course, it's AI driven. That's talent intelligence, the future. AI is infused everywhere, but natively designed in all the pillars in one horizontal. And so you have like vertical SaaS, which is also very different. But that was kind of like Web 2.0-ish, where companies would do the vertical. More and more companies are figuring this out, not in the rec tech space necessarily, but adjacent spaces in sales and MarTech. But we're super excited. It's going to happen no matter what. And people are seeing it. There's lots of legacy ATS companies that we've been competing with for a long time. And, we're standing on their shoulders, and we're here because of them. And we're grateful that they helped pave the path. But it's almost kind of sad to see what's happening. They used to ignore us. Now they're not, and their customers are fleeing, and it's they've been in business for 20, 30 years, and it's not going to exist. Some of them will go out of business or look to exit here in a couple of years, but it's going to happen really quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's evolution. At the end of the day, it's simply what it is. It's it's survival of the fittest. How do you adapt to the times as the markets change, as people's change, as behaviors change? That's why capitalism works so well in America, because the best product, the best service is what will float to the top. And if you aren't keeping up with that, then you're going to fall to the wayside.
Yep, exactly. It's fascinating, but yeah, I think it'll happen.
Yeah. All right. So big statement, 3 years. I'm going to hold you to it. Anything else? Did we miss anything else within this concept, or is that pretty much the meat of it?
That's the beat. Yeah. If people have more questions, we'd love to help answer questions, get to meet you. And thanks again, Sam. As always, really appreciate you inviting me. Yeah, no,
I'm glad you could come on to talk about this. We love these kind of statements. And like you said, it's like, let's discuss this. Let's talk about it. Let's hear other people's point of view. Like that's how you grow. That's how you learn. That's how products evolve. So agree, disagree, neutral, let us know. We'd still love to hear it. So all right, well, appreciate you joining as always. And then, as we wrap into the final spiel, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. You can find the show notes in the description of your favorite podcast stream platform, as well as on our website. Full video episode is available as well on YouTube. And if you have specific questions, you're ever looking for advice, send us an email at podcast@loxo.co. And if you really enjoyed this episode, we'll link in the description another episode that's just like this if you're not sure which one to listen to next. So, all right, everyone, that is the show. That was a hot mic drop with Matt. Until next time, bye, y'all.